2013, we've witnessed a steady stream of major security breaches. And looking back, we start to see, going back even further than this, a steady stream emerging with constantly, we're seeing in the news, breach after breach. We're really coming into a golden age of application security. We have a lot of ground to cover. But I'm not here to scare you. I'm not here to sell FUD. What I'm here to do is empower you. When we look at a lot of these breaches that have been going on, lots of them were preventable. Many of them were addressed very specifically by the OWASP Top 10. My name is Mark Major, and on behalf of the Boulder and Denver OWASP chapters, I'd like to welcome you to Colorado and welcome you to AppSecUSA 2014. Whether you are a builder or a breaker or a defender or a leader or just joining the field, we have something here for you at AppSecUSA. We have in this room, we're going to have all of the standard sessions that you're used to. We have the sponsor expo that's going to be off just down the hallway here and through the hallway. And also upstairs, we've got a number of session tracks that are just up the escalator that I wanted to call attention to. We've got a Wasp Nest CTF. We've been building this out of the Boulder OWASP chapter for about 2 years now. It's pretty impressive. I encourage you guys to take a look. As soon as Bruce's keynote is done, we're going to do a kickoff for that. So if you'd like to learn more, head on up into just right up the stairs. It's off to your right in the Penrose 2 ballroom. Right next door to that, in the Independence Room, we're trying out a new session track this year. We haven't done it before, and I'm really hoping that it goes over well. The idea here, there's not really a roadmap to learning hands-on, to learning application security. A lot of what people who are in the industry, the way they've gotten into it is being self-taught. What we're trying to do here is make that a little bit easier. Give a hands-on lab, give people direct experience using a number of tools, completely judgment-free. We're not assuming any prior knowledge. And what we're looking for, we have introductory level training. This can be perfect for people who are just getting into the field. This can be perfect for cross-pollination. If you're a developer and you've developed web apps, but you've never used a web proxy, we've got sessions going there. And most of our sessions for the Skills Lab today are going to be introductory classes. The ones that are going on tomorrow are going to be a little bit higher level. So if you're already in the field and you're looking to reinforce your core skills or learn some new tools, definitely check out that track. Very often at conferences, some of the best conversations happen outside of the sessions. The sessions are what get us started talking, but often within an hour space or 45 minutes really, it's not enough to get the whole message. So we have these birds of a feather tracks that you can sign up for. And I'm going to present, I'm going to pitch the idea for the first one, which is going to be a continuation of Bruce's talk. So if you guys hear something and you want to keep talking about it, let's go on up and let's continue that conversation. We also have these going through lunchtime. We have an extended lunch period of 90 minutes, which is plenty of time to go and see the sponsors, have some lunch, go up, do a birds of a feather or an open mic. Right outside that room, we also have sign up, and the way we're doing that is popular choice. So if somebody has a good idea for an open mic talk, go up there, pitch it. We've got a whiteboard, that a flipboard you can write it on. And if you see a talk that you'd like to attend, go ahead and make a mark by it. And we'll announce, we've got it staggered where the birds of a feather are going to be in the morning and the open mics are going to be later in the day. So after lunch, we'll be announcing what the open mics are so everybody is aware of what's going on there. We have a couple other tracks if you are not familiar with OWASP, or if you're loosely familiar and you'd like to learn more. If you want to start a chapter, if you want to be involved in some kind of a OWASP project, we've got all sorts of project developers. We have project leaders, chapter leaders. We've got all sorts of people who are coming together. This is a time to collaborate. If you are a chapter leader and you've had success, if you've had some questions, if you're interested in trying to grow your chapter and you need ideas, if you are looking to find better ways to get speakers or get funding, whatever you want to do, we have this entire track just dedicated just for that. And we're covering anything to do with starting, growing, and showcasing, whether it's a chapter or a project. Behind the escalators, we have a lockpicking village, which always goes over well in these crowds.
All of this is made possible through our sponsors. We couldn't do any of this. We couldn't have the great speakers. We really couldn't be doing any of this conference without them. I'd like to say thank you, but I'd like to encourage everybody else here to please go and talk to them. Learn about what they do. Stop by their booth. Say thanks. We also have, to entice you, in case altruism isn't enough, in your welcome kits, in addition to the program, which will detail all the talks, we have a passport, and we have participating sponsors where you can go and have them stamp your passport, and at the end we'll have a raffle, and you win all sorts of fun stuff. So the sponsors are one piece of that. OWASP, as an organization, is a 501c3, and they fund more than 100 different projects. They have conferences that they'll fund, not just AppSecUSA, but local conferences. They'll have OWASP days, where they will help fund to fly in speakers and pay for a lot of stuff, but this takes resources, and to help subsidize that cost, one thing that you can do is attend a conference like this, but another is we have our merchandise store, and all the profits from that will go right back into the OWASP Foundation. If you'd like to see that money go into a specific project, then you can take your chips that also came in your welcome kit. There are 4 yellow chips in your kit. Each of those are worth $5. You can either use that to purchase items out of the merchandise store, or you can go by the registration desk and donate it to an OWASP project of your choice. Got a pretty good lineup, even outside of all the session tracks. After Bruce's talk, he's going to be doing a book signing. That's also sort of underneath the escalator, so if you go right out into the main lobby there, there will be a line, I'm sure. Later today, if you're job hunting, then we have a career fair that's going to start right with lunch, and that'll go through the end of the day. If you want to get a head start on that, we have linked off of our website. You can we have a number of job postings already up there. You can send us your resume, and we can get that distributed. And we're here to help you guys network. So the participating career fair sponsors have some balloons flying over their booths. If you look for those, then you know that there is going to be a recruiter who's specifically here to talk to you. Toward the tail end of lunch, we're going to have a teaser for the magic show that's coming up at the end of the day. In the evenings, we've got 2 great activities. One of them is a bug bash, which is legal hacking of national companies. They've got bounties up to $5,000. You can either donate that back into OWASP or take the money and run if you can find some good bugs. So those are a lot of fun, and I highly recommend them. We also have something that's a little bit of local flavor. We call it Code Brew. Homebrew competition. The descriptions of the beers are fantastic, not to be missed. It's going to be a lot of fun. We've got some great judges. We've got some great brewers. 100% homebrew. This is beer hacking, beer-to-beer networking. Great stuff. But the main event is world-renowned security technologist. He's a vocal advocate for privacy, best-selling author. One of the best cryptographers of our generation. He's influential. He's opinionated. And he's the subject of a recent Sherlock Holmes fan fiction. Ladies and gentlemen, Bruce Schneier.
Thank you. Hey, thank you. There's a lot of stuff up here. Hey, thanks for waking up. So good morning. I want to talk about incident response, which I guess we saw that nice little timeline as to what happens when we all here aren't perfect. I want to talk about incident response because I've been thinking about it a lot, but in a sort of typical my fashion. I'm going to talk about 3 broad trends in cybersecurity. I'll give 4 laws from economics, something from psychology. I'll talk about the current state of incident response and try to tie this up with some systems theory from the US Air Force. So that's sort of the plan for the day. All right, so 3 trends that I think are really important for our industry. The first is that we're losing control of our IT infrastructure. Now, I've been doing this for a while. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you also have. More and more, our infrastructure isn't under our control. And that is the result of really two different trends. The first is the rise of cloud computing. Right? Cloud computing means that we no longer have control of our data. Right? Our email, photos, calendar, address book, messages, documents. Right? They're all on servers belonging to Google and Apple and Microsoft and Facebook and everybody else. Right? I use Eudora for my email, but I'm a freak. Right? There might be no one else who does. Right? So this is true for us as individuals. It's also true for us as organizations. Right? My company outsources its email to Google. I mean, a lot more institutions outsource their CRM system, their applications, increasingly their infrastructure, their desktops, sort of everything to somebody else. Now this is interesting because we cannot affect the security of these systems. Often we have no visibility into it. I mean, I can't go to Google and say, I want my email to have more security. I get what they give me. I really can't go to Rackspace and say, do this thing for me. Maybe I can put some security on top. Often I can't. As users, certainly not. I mean, I don't even know what operating system Facebook uses. And what's interesting is it doesn't matter because it's just all outsourced. And I think it's a really important trend. And it's not just outsourcing, it's outsourcing of outsourcing. So, I, as Co3, might have an application provider, and they have some kind of service provider hosting their infrastructure, and it's 3 or 4 companies deep. So where actually is my data? I mean, the physical bits of my data, who knows? What laws are they under? What security are they under? It's very hard to tell. The second part of this is we're increasingly accessing our data by devices that we have much less control over. Right? So think of iPhones and iPads and Google what do they call it? Android phones, Kindles, right? Chromebooks. I mean, with these new user devices, we have much less control over. I can't actually write a file erasure program. This is an iPhone. I can't write a file erasure program for this because I don't have access to the memory. Right? So more of us are accessing our data on these sorts of things. And it's not just individuals, in companies. Right? The CEO wants to get stuff on this. This is much harder to secure. Now, there are a whole lot of good reasons why this device has much less user control, but it still affects security. Right? We can't run arbitrary software. And what's interesting to watch is even the traditional operating systems moving this direction. Right? The business case for Apple for locking this down and giving them control is really powerful. So if you look at Mountain Lion and Yosemite, or even Windows 8, it's increasingly pushing people towards this vendor-controlled model. Right? Buy stuff from the store, don't configure things, let us do everything. And I suspect that's where desktops, laptops are going. That we're going to see phone operating systems and desktop operating systems converge. Windows 8 did a little bit badly, but they'll get better at it. And it'll converge closer to the phones, right? Closer to less user control. Right? And organizations doing this for good financial reasons. Right? It makes financial sense, but it's hard for security. Infrastructure is always outsourced. Computers are infrastructure. Right? Expect more outsourcing in every aspect. And that's just what's going to happen. The second trend, attacks are getting more sophisticated. And I think we've seen this over the past few years. There's a wide variety of attackers, nation state, non-nation state, and the attacks are getting better. You see a lot more cyber war rhetoric. I don't like the term. Right? We are not fighting a cyber war today, but what we are seeing is a democratization of tactics. Right? We're increasingly seeing warlike tactics used in more general cyber conflicts. And this is important. Right? When technology, especially IT technology, technology spreads capability. We're used to being able to determine who the attacker is by the weaponry. Right? If you walked outside and you saw a tank, you would know the government was involved because only governments could afford tanks. Right? The weaponry determined the attacker, which determined the defense. That mnemonic doesn't work anymore. Right? Everybody's using the same stuff. And a lot of this is tied into the term advanced persistent threat. Sort of an interesting term, about 5 years old. Originally I hated it, and I've come around, because I think it describes something really important. If you think about attackers, you can plot them along two different axes, skill and focus. So think of those types of attackers. Low skill, low focus attackers, those are your script kiddies, your opportunists. What I always think of as the background radiation of the internet, the stuff that just happens millions of times a day. High skill, low focus, that's the attack against Target, the attack against Home Depot, identity theft attacks, zero-day exploits. Stuff that's very sophisticated, but the target's more or less irrelevant. When Target got attacked, but the attackers didn't target. Right? They wanted a large block of credit card numbers. Low skill, high focus, I think of those as basic targeted attacks. High skill, high focus, that's APT. And the reason that's important is the threat model is completely different. Against your typical attacker, the kind of stuff we in the industry have defended against, security was relative. Right? What mattered for Target is not how secure they were, but how secure they were related to everybody else. Relative security mattered. If they're more secure than their neighbors, the attackers go there. Against APT, that's not a valid consideration. In APT, the attacker, for some reason, wants the victim. It's personal for some specific reason. So what matters is the absolute security. Is the defender better than the attacker? Is the attacker better than the defender? And you all know somebody who works in penetration testing. Really, not just for the big consulting companies that plays around. Someone does it real. You know that they never fail not to get in. Against a sufficiently motivated, skilled, funded attacker, we do not know how to defend. Right? And this is sort of broad. The attacker has the advantage on the internet. You could look at any kind of attacker-defender situation as an arms race. I will look at military history. And you can go through the decades of centuries and see the balance shift in attacker and defender, depending on weaponry and tactics, depending on technology. World War I, World War II, modern day. The same is basically true on the internet. And right now, on the internet, the attacker has the advantage. And that probably will be true for the foreseeable future. So this is APT. I think of it as politically motivated hacking. And by politics, I mean something very broad. Not just political, nationalistic, ethical, religious, or think of companies people love to hate. Used to be Microsoft, now it's Google. Against governments, corporations, institutions, individuals. You can argue that some of the attacks against the celebrities on iCloud, that's a politically motivated attack in this nomenclature. It's not criminals looking for money, it's someone targeting a specific person or a specific class of people. And this is just getting more sophisticated. Not just hacktivism, or also IP theft, and even financially motivated hacking is getting more sophisticated. What we're seeing is that cybercrime has finally matured as an industry. The whole supply chain is in place. Thieves, fences, people who monetize. Every part of that chain is robust, and you as a cyber criminal can slot into what you do best. Third trend is the increasing government involvement in cyberspace. And I mean this in several ways. I don't mean just the NSA spying on everything. We're seeing a much more complicated regulatory environment. In the US, in Europe, elsewhere, there are a lot more rules surrounding the data you have to store, the security measures you have to have, the reporting requirements you have to satisfy. So there's a lot of legal stuff that companies, organizations have to know about, have to follow. There's also a lot of nation-state espionage and attack. And we as organizations tend to be collateral damage. So Stuxnet happens and some of us get attacked. Or Flame or Dooku or sort of any of those nation-state malware. A lot of us, either because we have data countries want or we happen to be in the way, we get hit by it. We've seen lots of examples of governments trying to censor their own internet and accidentally censoring pieces of the entire internet. It happens in China regularly. The way that Great Wall works, you'll see companies that have nothing to do with China fall down once in a while. Or when we think North Korea tests their ability to reroute traffic. And I think this is going to get worse. We're in the early years of a cyber war arms race, and countries are paying more attention to cyber as a theater of war, a theater of espionage, as a place they should be looking and doing stuff. And they are doing stuff. So those are the three trends that I think are important for us in the industry here. I want to talk a bit about the economics of IT and IT security, because I think that really helps explain our industry, what's going on and where we're going. So the first thing I want to talk about is the notion of network effects. Now, you've all heard of network effects, best encapsulated in Metcalfe's law, the sort of lesser-known cousin to Moore's law. Metcalfe's law says the value of a network equals the square of the number of users. The value of the network equals the number of connections between nodes. And this is true, right? This is true for real networks, phones, email, SMS. Right? One phone that does SMS is stupid, 2 is kind of boring, 1 million, suddenly you have something useful. It's true for Skype, for Facebook, for all of those things where we connect. It's also true for networks of users. The network of Windows versus Mac users, or iOS versus Android users, or network of OWASP members. The more of us there are, the better it is for us to be here. And that's the way network effects work. The big get bigger because as being big, you are more attractive to others. Right? Facebook gets bigger because Facebook is big. If you want to join a social network, you're going to join the one your friends are on. You're not going to join the better one. Because better doesn't matter. Where your friends are matters. It's a real important mechanic in IT. The second is the notion of fixed costs and variable costs. Fixed costs and marginal costs. In any product, there are two types of costs. There's the fixed cost and the marginal cost, right? So for this bottle of water, there's some fixed cost for setting up the equipment, and there's a cost of putting the water in the bottle and putting it in the store. For most traditional products, all your costs are in marginal costs. In IT, they tend to be in fixed costs. Here's another product with a lot of fixed costs, right? This is the book. Right? The first copy of this book was kind of expensive because I had to write it. The second copy of this book was just pushing +1 on the printer. So most of the money in here is tied up in fixed costs. An operating system. The first copy of Microsoft Windows costs, I'm making this up, $20 million. Second copy is free. True for movies, tends to be true for pharmaceuticals. And what's sort of interesting about this kind of economics, when most of the cost is in development, it makes them very powerful to attack. Right? If you are, and this does happen, a printing company in China, you can make copies of these and sell them for a couple of bucks because they don't cost much to make, and you don't have to recover the fixed costs. You don't have to pay me a royalty or pay the publisher the work they did to put this book out. Right? For operating systems, for movies. And that's why you see so much effort going into copy protection and controlling of these types of industries, patents, to control these fixed costs. In other cases, high fixed costs is a barrier to entry. Think of Google Earth. Once you've mapped the planet, it's a significant barrier for a competitor to do the same thing, because now you can lower your price. I mean, if I want to, put someone out of business from copying my book, I drop the price of my book very, very low and drive them out of business. Right? I can afford to do that because it's my property. I can wait. I mean, that's the kind of thing Walmart does. Related, this is the third piece of economics, the notion of switching costs. Switching cost is the price you have to pay to switch to a competitor. So for a normal product, switching costs are very low. I drink a Coke today. If I don't like it, I'll drink a Pepsi tomorrow. In other industries, switching costs are very, very high. Right? My cell phone provider is AT&T. If I don't like them today, I'm probably going to have AT&T tomorrow. Right? It's much more expensive for me to switch cell phone providers than it is for me to switch colas. Now, this is interesting. What this means, actually, there is Hal Varian, economist in California, works for Google. But pre that, there's something called the Shapiro-Varian theorem, where he basically said that the total value of a software company equals their switching costs, the total switching costs of their customers. How much would it cost their customers to switch to a competitor? And in software, switching costs can be high. Right? It can mean retraining staff, rewriting applications, converting data. And the reason this is important for the industry, for you, for the suppliers, is that, I mean, again, think of the cell phone company. The higher the switching costs, the more a company can piss you off before you'll switch. Right? The lousier service they can. AT&T doesn't have to provide very good service. Just has to be good enough that I don't switch. The Coke has to taste really good. AT&T has to just really, really not suck. I think this explains a lot, actually. And companies do pretty much everything they can to keep switching costs high. Think of non-compatible accessories, not letting you get at your data when you want to leave, proprietary file formats. These are all ways to keep switching costs high. You want to switch from iTunes to somebody else, good luck taking your music. You want to switch from Kindle to Nook, good luck taking your books. You want to switch from gaming consoles, and that's why nobody wants to sell conversion boxes, because that lowers switching costs. Remember however many years ago when the cell phone companies were fighting cell phone number portability in the United States? Right? The idea was that we should, when we lease a cell phone company, we should take our phone number with us. Cell phone companies all screamed. Why? Because that would lower switching costs. Because the switching costs involves telling all your friends and colleagues and printing new business cards, you're really unlikely to switch companies. Fourth and last piece of IT economics, the notion of a lemons market. This is great work by an economist named George Akerlof. He won a Nobel Prize for this. And what he studied is markets with an asymmetry of information between buyer and seller. He looked at markets where the sellers know a lot more about the products than the buyers. The sort of quintessential thought experiment, he described this, was a used car market. This is why this is called the lemons market paper. And he postulated, and this is a thought experiment, a town with 1,000 used cars for sale, There are 500 good cars at $2,000 each, 500 lemons at $1,000 each. In this market, in this town, the equilibrium price for cars is $1,500. You can imagine the math. And at that price, all the lemons sell and none of the good cars sell. So what he noticed is that in this asymmetric market, in this market where sellers know more about products than buyers, bad products drive good products out of the market. And he didn't just do this mathematically, he verified this empirically, experimentally. That in any of these markets, basically when the buyer can't tell the difference between bad and good, he's going to buy bad because it'll be cheaper. I think this explains IT security a lot. I mean, you go back to the 90s and all of the firewalls. The ones that won weren't the good ones. Or in the 2000s, all the IDSs. The ones that came out on top weren't the best ones. Right? I can hold up two encryption products. They have the same algorithm, same protocol, same buzzwords. One is well designed and secure, one isn't. You can't tell the difference. Are you going to pick the cheaper? Now, in these markets, when consumers can't tell between good and bad, they rely on what economists call signals. In a used car market, a typical signal is a warranty. Buy the car, take it home, drive it for a month, you don't like it, bring it back. Right? That is a signal to the buyer that the seller is not selling him a lemon. In the IT market, we tend not to have warranties. We have certifications, we have reviews, we have peer recommendations. Remember the 1960s slogan, no one ever got fired for buying IBM? That was a signal. We have awards. You ever wonder why companies chase those really dumb awards at those conferences? This is why. They're signals. They're ways buyers can convince themselves they're making a good purchase, or at least not a bad purchase. All right, now one piece of psychology. I'll talk about the process of buying and selling security. There's a really nice piece of research. It's called prospect theory. Sometimes you'll hear it called loss aversion or framing effect, but the real name is prospect theory. This is fantastic work done by two psychologists who, oddly enough, were the only non-economists to ever win the Nobel Prize in economics for basically telling the economists that everything they thought was wrong. It's kind of neat. I hope to do that someday. I'll give you the basic experiment in prospect theory. This explains how it works. You would take a room like this of experimental subjects like you and divide it in half, and you'd ask this half of the room to make a choice between $1,000, here, I'll give you the cash, or a coin flip at $2,000. So you're asking these people, are you risk averse or risk seeking? And if you do that, about 3/4 of this half will take the money. That $1,000 beats a coin flip at $2,000. Then you ask this half of the room a similar question, actually the same question but as a loss. I'll give you a choice. I will either take $1,000 from you, or I'll let you flip a coin, and if you lose, I take $2,000. Again, the same question, are you risk averse or risk seeking, but in terms of a loss instead of a gain? And if you do this, about 3/4 of the room will take the coin flip. This is actually freaky. This shouldn't happen, because it really is the same thing, but just framed two different ways. And actually, it's even a weirder experiment where you have the exact same choice and you just describe it differently, and you'll get the same results. So we as human beings tend to be risk averse when it comes to gains and risk seeking when it comes to losses. This is a surprisingly robust result. It is true across ages, genders, cultures. You can see the same results in other primates. This is something that we are hardwired for. And actually, the best explanation I've ever heard of this comes from evolutionary psychology. So if you imagine that you are a species living at the edge of survival, which species tend to live at, and you have the choice between a small gain or a risky larger gain, the small gain means you'll live to see tomorrow. The coin flip gain means half of you are going to die. So you'll take the small gain. The sure win is better than the risky larger win. On the other hand, a sure small loss means you're dead. So faced with a loss, you might as well take the risk, right? A larger loss means you're still dead, but you might avoid the loss entirely. So this basically explains why it's hard to sell cybersecurity. Because cybersecurity is a choice between a guaranteed small loss by the product or a risky larger loss. You'll get attacked and it'll be really bad. Actually, this isn't just true for cybersecurity. You'll see the same effects in selling insurance, selling burglar alarms. That by and large, people tend to prefer to take the risk than spend the money. And you know this. You go to your boss and say, we need this thing to secure our network. And he looks at you and says, we didn't have it last month. Why do you need it this month? Right? Why? I took the chance last month inadvertently and came out okay. Why can't I keep taking the chance going forward? I might still come out okay. Doesn't mean it's impossible to sell security, of course, but it does mean that it's harder. You're fighting this basic cognitive bias. I said I would talk about incident response, so I'm probably going to get here. How does this affect, incident response and even us more general? We know that security is a combination of protection, detection, and response. And that those are the three aspects of security. We know that we need response because protection and detection aren't perfect. Right? We also need it more today for a bunch of reasons I talked about. Right? We've lost control of our computing environment. Attacks are getting more sophisticated. We're increasingly pawns in other people's fights. And companies will underinvest in prevention and detection. Right? That happens. Way back in the 1990s, I used to say security is a process, not a product. And I meant that strategically, that you can't just buy a bunch of products and say you're done. Now I'm thinking more tactically, and security is really a product and a process. Right? In the early 2000s, I would say that it's people, process, and technology. And that's a good way of thinking of it, people, process, and technology. Because what's changing are the ratios. Right? The conventional wisdom is that people don't generally help with security. In fact, they're a problem and need to be removed. I have a quote from security usability guru Lori Faith Craner. She writes in a paper, whenever possible, security system designers should find ways of keeping humans out of the loop. And we've been doing that. We've been doing that pretty well. We have entirely automated prevention systems, automated patching, automated updates, right? Lots of automated and semi-automated detection systems. But here's the thing of it. You can't fully automate response. Right? Response necessarily involves people. So as you move from protection, detection to response, the people to technology ratio necessarily goes up. You're forced to put people in response even if you remove people from protection, because it's hard to automate. All attacks are different, kind of unique. All networks are different. Security environments are different. Organizations are different. Regulatory environments are different. Right? And they're not different in technical ways. They're different in people ways. And what's interesting is this affects the economics of security. Incident response products and services are different because the ratios are different. There are less network effects. There's higher marginal cost. There's lower switching cost. And there's less of a lemons market. So what this means, at least when I look at it, is that unlike a lot of other areas in security, better products and better companies are more likely to do better. It's less of an uphill battle if you are a small company with a really good idea. Because the economics are more on your side than they were if you had a protection company or a detection company. And there's much less of a first mover advantage. I mean, there's much lower natural monopolies. It just tends to work better. And I think this is going to be really good for our industry. And this is something I think that's going to be beneficial. All right, so people, process, and technology. The key to making this work is to getting it to scale. And I'm going to read the next sentence from Lori Craner's paper. After she wrote what I read before, she wrote, however, there are some tasks for which feasible or cost-effective alternatives to humans are not available. In these cases, system designers should engage these systems to support the humans in the loop and maximize their chance of performing their security-critical functions successfully. That's the way to think of emergency response. And actually, think of any emergency response. Think of police, think of medical, think of fire, think of military. In all of those cases, technology supports the people and doesn't try to replace the people. Because the people are critical. They must be in the loop, so we need technology to support them. The goal here, of course, is resilience. And to build our networks to be resilient in the face of successful attack. A lot of aspects to resilience, right? Mitigation, survivability, recovery, adaptability. I think of them as all the Y requirements, all the adverbs. And we need to build all of those things in. And to make it work effectively, it's all about feedback loops. So now I'm going to talk a bit about systems theory. There's an interesting piece of system theory coming out of the US Air Force, and it's the concept of OODA loops. And I'm starting to see it percolate in IT, and I think it's something we need to think about a lot. OODA is OODA, stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. It's a feedback loop. Developed by the US Air Force. The person thinking about this is, I think he was a captain named John Boyd, and he was, maybe a colonel, he was looking at basically at dogfights. At attack, defense, and fighter aircraft. And how he conceptualized what the fighter pilot is doing is going through this OODA loop constantly to observe, orient, decide, and act. And what his observation was that if you can have your people perform their OODA loop faster than the opponent, you will have an enormous advantage. And he calls it getting inside the other person's OODA loop. So what he wants in a fighter jet cockpit are technologies that support one of those four things. Observe, orient, decide, and act to help the pilot do it faster. So since he came up with this, you've seen the OODA loops spread out. I'll see them talked about in strategic military planning, in business competition, and in IT security. It's a good way of thinking about this real-time iterative process. Because people, again, we'll think of it in an incident response situation, are constantly going through an OODA loop. Again and again and again and again as they're responding to the situation. Okay, what's going on? What does it mean? What do we do? Let's do it. Okay, what's going on? What does it mean? What do we do? Let's do it. And here, speed is essential. You need to have your OODA loop faster than your attacker. And that is how you'll get him out of your system. If he's faster than you, you won't be able to get him out of your system. So what this means for our industry is that we need some tools. Right? We need tools to facilitate getting these OODA loops going. So observing, right? Real-time threat detection, information from IDSs, log monitoring, log analysis, network data, performance data. network management tools, physical security information, basically everything. We need ways that people in IR can observe what's going on. What's the state of the software? What's the state of the network? What's the state of the system? What's the state of the company? And orient, understand what it means in context. So this is more analytic tools. Context of the organization, context of the greater internet community. Is there a new piece of malware out? Is there a new political upheaval going on? Right? Is the organization I'm in installing a new software package or contemplating layoffs or having a merger? I mean, has our network been opened up to some partner? What's going on? And then deciding. And I don't think we spend enough time on deciding. Deciding is hard. It's not just figuring out what to do. Who has the power to decide? How do they decide? Who has input? Does executives have input? Does marketing have input? Does legal have input? How is this decision justified, approved? How is it audited later? How do we ensure that what we decide we can, after everything's over, we can defend? And then act. How can we take our decision and do it? And this is security, right? Security often touches everything else. Lots of permissions you might have not have normally, you might need at the moment you have to act in a security incident. Right? So broad access. I mean, the notion of don't ask permission, ask forgiveness. The very permissive access control. We give you access to everything, but we might ask you what the hell you were doing later. Very different sort of access, but the kind of access you need in a security incident. This requires broad access, more training. So we need tools to do all these things. And I think we're getting them. Right? I mean, what's going on is incident response is getting more important. I often think of the 90s as the decades of prevention, the 2000s as the decades of detection, and this is the decade of response. We're seeing a lot more response. Right? Attacks getting more sophisticated, regulatory environments getting more sophisticated, litigation is getting more complicated, geopolitics is spilling over, and organizations are still underinvesting in security. The neat thing, and the reason I like being in this space, is that IR is not going to be like the rest of security. The good stuff is going to do better. The good stuff will beat the mediocre stuff. And that is an enormous opportunity for us as engineers. That we can build good stuff, and it's less likely we'll get lost in the noise. Now, you can go to the RSA conference. It's really easy to get lost on the show floor if you're a small company. I think it's harder to get lost if you're doing incident response. Right, so full disclosure, this is what I'm doing these days. I have a company, Co3 Systems, that's doing IR software that tries to put people, process, technology together. So I'll spare you that. Chris, where's Chris? Wave his hand. If you want to know about, talk to him, talk to me. We're around. This, I think, is going to change our industry. I think it's going to make it a lot better. It's going to make us a lot more sophisticated, a lot more robust, a lot more mature. And it's something we need to do. Right? Defending against the threats requires protection, detection, response. We need to get response up there. And everything else has to feed into it. So that's my talk. Thank you. I should say right after this, I mean, after when we get out of here, they're going to just rip this room apart and turn it into like 3 little rooms. I'm going to be doing a book signing kind of over there. So come by and say hi, even if you don't have a book to sign. I'm happy to sit and chat for a while. I'll be here most of the day. Thank you for inviting me, and have a great conference.